Welcome, everyone. This is our first session of Ask Me Anything, and luckily also our first ever software engineer woman here at Awana in one of our sessions, and sadly our last event of the year. But we are very thankful for Elisa for giving us this time. I know it was very short notice, but everyone here was really excited, and I know a few folks that may not be joining but are waiting for the recording just after the event ends. So first things first, again, thank you everyone for joining. I am Daniela, the marketing manager at Awana. And for all of you that haven't heard about Awana, we are technical recruiters who place the brightest professionals in LATAM at US tech companies. So we want Latin Americans to thrive because we believe in LATAM, and we know the Latin Americans have this potential to unlock companies' achievements, goals, and reach milestones. So we are here to also help you believe it, because I know you know it, but sometimes with this crazy environment, we might forget it. But also, Elisa is here to help you remember your why. So for those who haven't met or haven't heard about Elisa, she has over 20 years of experience combining design, engineering, product development. So she's one to transition from a non-tech career to a technical one. So for those joining this new career or going, I don't know, from UX UI design to a technical job, so she's the perfect person to ask questions. It's always a good place to have a mentor. So this is also another opportunity for you to meet one of the most amazing mentors. I've already asked around, and she has like plenty of good reviews about her mentorships. So without going any further, Elisa, if there's something else you would like to add there, let's get this AMA started.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So like she mentioned, I do have a quote unquote non-traditional background in engineering. I went to art school, and so I spent 15 years of my career in graphic design field, marketing field, brand design, etc. And I also taught in higher education for some of that time as well. And then I made the transition to engineering. I am a self-taught software engineer, so I did not go to a boot camp or go back to college to make that transition. So if you have questions about how that worked, happy to dive in deeper there. But yeah, aside from that, happy to answer anything about your journey in tech, about hiring, about interviewing. I've had a lot of mentees. So got a lot of knowledge and a lot of stories in my background. When I first met Daniela, I told her that my like secret mission in life is to get more Latinos in tech. And I do that very loudly at where I work right now, which is Strava. And if you're unfamiliar with what Strava is, we are a platform that allows you to track your GPS and non-GPS workouts. So cycling, running, hiking, but also weightlifting and yoga, etc. And kind of share it via a social media type feed. So yeah, that's all me. I'm ready to hear a bunch of questions from y'all and hopefully help everybody out with anything that you want to know.
Great. So maybe if you don't want to unmute yourself because there's a lot of noise around you, you can just text the question. You can write it in the chat and I can read it out loud. Feel free to also show yourself on camera. We also love seeing faces and smiles. It's how we connect better. So I just have one question to get the this like kind of fireside chat happening. mostly because I come from a graphic design background as well. So and working in the tech industry, but not being a developer, I'm very curious on how to get this started, but also understanding why you changed, from the graphic design to engineering.
Yeah, similar question. Looks like it just popped up in the chat.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can two birds, one stone this one. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So like I mentioned, I had been teaching in higher education, and throughout that time, I had been teaching web development. And it became very apparent to me really early on in that part of my teaching career that there were a lot of designers who did not enjoy web development in the same way I did. And so I already kind of knew that I had this piece of my like soul that wanted to solve these very difficult tech problems at the same time while being creative, which to a lot of people seems a little bit like they're at odds with one another. But to me, they seemed like a natural fit. It could be because I grew up in a household with a dad who was a civil and nuclear engineer and a mom who was an artist and a seamstress. So maybe that's just the two sides. But nonetheless, I kind of looked at that and thought, this is really interesting. Like I could turn this into a career when I decide to leave higher ed. And when I left higher ed, I decided to make that kind of little transition. And the first move was to move into product design. Back then it was called user-centric design. And then pretty soon after that, they started calling it UI UX design. And then later product design. And immediately as I started to design these apps, I was like, man, I'm seriously one step away from being able to build this thing. I can imagine it's probably pretty similar for like people who design furniture. Like how cool would it be to get your hands dirty? And I really felt like it was just the next step in my design career to be able to actually build the things. To touch a little bit on the question in the chat, which is what made me switch to a tech career. I didn't know that tech existed when I made this transition. I didn't know what product development was. I didn't know anything about the product development lifecycle at all, nor did I know anything about tech. But what I did know was that I wanted to build products. I wanted to design them and I wanted to build them. And it called to me so much that I actually considered going back to graduate school and getting a degree in physical product design. So like, designing actual physical products. And so I couldn't even articulate, like, I wanted a job in tech. I didn't know what that is. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which if you don't know anything about New Mexico in general, we're a very rural state, very spread out, and in a lot of cases, very economically poor. And so there's not a lot of tech companies out here. So it wasn't even something that was on my radar. So I didn't make the change to get into tech. I got into tech because I made the change, if that makes sense. So I hope that answered your question, David and Daniela. And then there's another one in the chat from Alicia. Let me read it.
Yes.
How do you, being a self-taught professional, how do you deal with other professionals that have gone to boot camps or college? How do you present yourself at interviews to back up your knowledge? This is a really great one. So the company that I work at right now is pretty decent size. The next move for us is hopefully IPO. So that means we'll go public hopefully soon. We have over 120 million users on our platform, which is very easily the largest user base I've ever worked at. My colleagues all, and by colleagues, I mean my direct peers, all have degrees from Clemson, MIT, Stanford, these really big Harvard institutions. And I went to art school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I want to call out, right? Some of what this question is asking is like, how do you handle being in the room with people like that when you went to art school in Albuquerque, New Mexico? And I think the answer is like, I'm already doing the job. I had been doing the job before I came here. It's really easy for me to get hung up on the fact that I don't have the pedigree or credentials. And yet it's also important that I continue to remind myself that there's a lot of reasons why I don't have that piece of paper from those institutions. And some of those have to do with me making the decision to go to art school, but some of them also have to do with access. Like I said, I grew up in a state that is very rural and very economically poor. And, you know, people that looked like me did not get chances to go to space camp or, you know, to even be introduced to STEM. My dad was an engineer, so it was something that was part of my life. And yet it was really hard to envision myself working in a role like that, particularly because I was a woman and my dad was a man. So it was really easy, like, to be like, my dad's an engineer, my mom's a seamstress, right? There's a lot of reasons behind that. The other thing is to remember that sometimes some of those gates that are put up on purpose to deter us from walking into rooms in which we belong in. And I have to check that every time I'm in a room with my peers. I have to remind myself that they might have degrees from MIT, and yet we're doing the same job as one another. We're in the same place. And there's a reason for that. And sometimes reminding yourself of that can be difficult, but it's very important. The second part of the question was, how do you present yourself at interviews to back up your knowledge? So this is a pretty complex question. I'm happy to share a slide deck with y'all from a talk I gave a couple weeks ago about exactly this, but there's a couple different ways that I do this. The first thing is I walk into that interview very clear on what I want out of my next opportunity. And it signals to the company and the interviewing team a couple of things. One, that I'm an investment, that I have expectations as you know, a potential employee, and that I don't just want a job because I need a job, that I'll probably stick around if you can meet, you know, the things that I'm asking for. And they're not unreasonable things, right? The next thing that I do on my resume was I was very strategic about what jobs and experience from my previous quote unquote non-tech roles I put on my resume. I focused on transferable skills for the job that I wanted. So I knew that I wanted to build products. I put skills in there that I knew focused on that. Collaboration, leadership, communication skills, those were all really important for me to highlight. And I made sure that I called those out in bullet points on my resume from previous experiences. And then the next thing that I did was I started contracting immediately. And I started small, right? Like I'd reach out to people and be like, hey, do you need a website? Do you need an app? And some of those weren't paying. Some of them were pro bono. I didn't do that forever. I'm not saying don't pay yourself. I am saying what it did was it allowed me to put a section on my resume that said apps. And I had a list of apps that I had launched either to the App Store or like deployed for public use on the internet. And so what that was signaling was that while I have never had the title of software developer or engineer, I have experience writing code, taking something from my machine and putting it out to a public user base. And that told them that I could do the job. And then of course, like interviewing tips that we could go deeper into if you'd like. But I hope that answers your question, Alicia. Let me know if you want to dive in deeper anywhere.
Yeah, so I'm going to chime in here because we have Latin American developer community. You know, so one of the hardest things for them is to sell themselves, sell their skills. And so if there are like any tips there that you could just share from personal experience when you first started, you know, interviewing, and also you as a hiring manager, you know, like what are you looking for when someone even answers, what are your strengths?
I think this is a tough cultural thing. I think it just comes from you know, some of our culture and background and not wanting to brag or to be perceived as arrogant. I think it's also something that can get in the way of us getting in those spaces that we know that we belong in and can fill. And so it's something that's important to try to unlearn. And you know, frankly, I think it was put in place as yet just another gate to keep us out of spaces that we quite frankly belong in. So a reminder to yourself that like saying the things that you're good at is not bragging or being arrogant if it's the truth. And if you have a hard time figuring out what those things are, because we always do about ourselves, it's much easier to say the things that we're not good at than the things that we are good at. Talk to your coworkers, your friends, or your family and make a list, because I guarantee you they know those things that you're good at and the things that you bring to the table, and they'll tell you. It's also just like a really great revealing exercise to have those conversations with people. So figure out what those things are and then start practicing being comfortable talking about them. Stop worrying about like other people thinking that you're bragging about yourself as much as you can, and try to let that go. So there was a second part to that question, Daniela. Can you remind me what it was? There was like the advocating for yourself, and then I think there was another piece in there, but I
Yes,
don't remember
it,
what
it was mostly when you, as a hiring manager, are asking what are your strengths, like what are you looking for in the answer, or is that like a specific set of skills that you're looking for, or more like an attitude thing?
Yeah, great question. Okay, thank you for reminding me. So to me, and this has also been my experience when I've interviewed for long periods of time, the thing that makes the hiring process so magic, and the thing that I love about it, and I think other recruiters probably love about it, is when you can match up what you're looking for in a job and the culture of the company with what somebody wants for their advancement in the career, because it means that you now made like a long-term investment in each other, right? There's nothing worse than turnover and like having to rehire somebody later on down the line because it wasn't a good fit or because you couldn't give them what they wanted out of the experience. So I think it's really important that you are able to articulate like what you want out of the job in a way that feels like confident and authentic and real to you. As far as like asking for strengths, the big things are like, I want to hear, to me, it's growth mindset. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's basically the ability to say, I don't know everything, but I will learn it if I need to. And I can admit when it's time for me to learn something, which you'd be surprised is a really rare skill in tech. And I'll tell you a lot, especially coming from a lot of folks that have 4-year degrees. What I see is they're used to being the smartest person in the room or the smartest person in their class. And then they come into an engineering job and they're like, they don't want to admit when they don't know something, and it actually ends up being detrimental. So to me, growth mindset is the biggest thing. It's not an attitude, it's just being clear and being honest about like what do you want, what brings you joy, what can I do for you as a manager if you join my team, right? Those are the important bits. All right, there's another one in the chat about what you said, not having certificates or a title. I mean, as a recruiter, I tried to share candidates like that in the past, but clients are not interested in those candidates as they prefer someone who studied experience and who can do to make them understand it's just the title. Yeah, this is tough. So the question is, what can you do to make them understand that it's just a title? I think if anything beneficial came out of the professional changes that happen as a result of the pandemic, it has been the recognition that true diversity in the workplace is not just about gender, racial, ethnic, et cetera, diversity. It's about diversity and background. And this to me is greater enforced by the idea of the rise of generative AI and what that's going to mean for product development going forward. At this point, I can tell ChatGPT to write an app from beginning to end with a series of prompts. And it will output some decent code. It's not great, okay, but it'll output some decent code. The model is going to continue to get better and smarter, and we're going to see more and more tools like this. So what that says to me is like, at some point, technical skills are no longer the things that we're hiring for. What I'm looking for is somebody who's going to come in and be a whole product engineer and proper teammate. I want somebody who can write documentation. I want somebody who can explain technical things to non-technical people. I want somebody who can mentor other professionals and be empathetic in how they teach and learn and, you know, share information. I want somebody who thinks about the user in a holistic manner and doesn't just want to ship beautiful code, but wants to ship beautiful products. So Jay, I think the answer to that is to talk about what the diversity and experience actually brings to the table. If you have a candidate who's got a background in some quote unquote non-traditional you know, spot like graphic design, if we want to use me as an example, think about the things that they can bring to the table for that role that somebody who doesn't have that background won't bring. And a prime example of how I did this and kind of spun it for myself was, if you hire somebody who just has an engineering background, they will write you gorgeous code, probably better code than I will write. However, if you want somebody who's going to build something that a user wants to use and care about that user and test it and care about the quality, I'm the person for the job. So it's all in how you prioritize what they want. Like if they just want to ship code, they should hire somebody from you know, traditional background, because that's their experience. So I hope that answered your question, Jake.
Yeah, so there's another one here related to projects. Like, do you have or maybe Axel, you can clarify the question even more, but I think it's maybe related with how do you show your projects, either in your LinkedIn profile or whatever.
Do I have a portfolio of projects? I did when I started, and I carried that all the way through until I changed into leadership role, which happened, I'd say now about 5 years ago. And then I think even now I would say it's kind of a portfolio of projects, because I would talk about the things that I led teams to ship. So at this point, it isn't like a portfolio of apps. It's a portfolio of like features inside of an app that I led to ship. I did not have like a traditional portfolio when I was applying to engineering roles. Like in other words, I didn't have a URL. I just put it on my resume, and I had like links where you could go to see the actual project. So available in the App Store. And then I would provide them like a test login to the app so that they could log in and use the App Store version once they downloaded it. Or I would give them a URL so that they could actually check it out on the internet. So I think either one of those is fine. I've definitely seen software engineers make traditional portfolios, and I think that's also okay. But you know, for me, I didn't feel like it was as important as much as showing that I actually did the work. I've seen engineers also just have amazing GitHubs and have links to their GitHubs. So that's another option as well. All right, let's see. Here's another one. I'm new to programming. I'm new to this programming thing. Well, welcome. That's awesome. Congratulations on making the change. How do you remember all the tags and codes? I'm afraid that in the future I'll work as a programmer and I won't be able to remember all the tags and codes. The truth is I don't, Peter. There is a reason why people say that Googling is like such an important part of a software engineer's job. Like you live on Stack Overflow. I live in like ChatGPT now too. It's super important that you remember that you will never retain all of the things. And in fact, when I don't code in one language for a long time and then switch back, I have to remember the syntax for that specific language, and it's tough to keep those all in your head. The big thing is if you can remember like the fundamental concepts of that programming language, then the syntax you can Google all day long. So like, I know that these specific constructs exist in this language. I know it's, let's say, compiled, or I know that you know, it compiles on runtime, or I know that it uses variable declarations in this way, or I know that it's got these helper methods that are great. You don't memorize them all. The other thing is Set up your IDE, your coding environment, to do auto completion for the language in which you're using. It is super helpful. It saves you so much time, and you don't have to remember all of the syntax. You don't have to remember if you're missing a colon or a semicolon someplace. It will help you with all of that. So your coding environment or your IDE is your best friend. But you'll still Google a lot of stuff, and that's okay. That's like, anybody who tells you that they don't Google is a liar. I have had mentors who are like, big time in certain language communities. Like one of them wrote several books in the Ruby community. He's been an engineer for 30 years and he still Googles stuff. So it's okay. You can still Google stuff.
Okay, so I have a question more related to that jump of being a programmer and then jump into leading a team and then jump into a managerial role. So like what happened there? Do you think there was like a specific time in your experience that it boosted your career somehow, or anything in particular, a method, habit, or something there, like consistency, let's say, that help you make that achievement, accomplish that?
Yeah. From my previous experience with teaching, I don't know if you all have ever had this experience, but you do something for the first time and you feel like that's maybe something that you'll probably do for the rest of your life. And it can be anything from a hobby to like a profession. That's how I felt the first time I got in a classroom. And there were things about it that I just completely connected with and loved. Higher education was not one of those things. So when I left teaching, it was because I didn't like higher education. But all of the stuff that I liked about teaching was stuff that I realized I could pursue with leadership and people leadership in particular. And so I always knew that that's where I was going to end up at some point. And that was what I was like slowly building to. At first, it was like, get all the technical skills that I need, and then make the decision when the time came. And the time came before I was ready, if I'm being honest. I had it on like my 3-year goal plan at that point. So I was like, in 3 years, this is where I want to be. And then it happened that year. And it happened because I was part of a smaller startup that was acquired by a Fortune 500 company. And when we got acquired, my VP of engineering, who led the team, and a bunch of my teammates went off into this bigger organization and built a brand new team. And they left me and 2 other engineers to kind of continue running this product. And I got asked to be the leader. I think part of it was, I had the longest tenure and I had expressed interest in leadership. And so kind of overnight, it was like, do you want to be a manager? And I remember being like, oh my God, I'm so not ready for this. This is like, and I agonized over saying yes, despite knowing that's where I wanted to be. And, to my, like all my mentors, friends and family's credit, they all were like, why wouldn't you say yes? This is what you want. I had to be talked into being successful, which is wild. But so I said yes, and I made that transition, into leadership, and I kept one foot in the code. So I still wrote code for 2.5 years. And if I had my way, I would still write code today at Strava, but I've got too many direct reports. I've got 13 direct reports. I can't write code anymore. But if it ever comes back, I would love to. So I think the big thing was I expressed interest in it very verbally and upfront. I knew that it was something that I wanted later on down the line. And I, did some work in reading and investment. I got a career coach. I got several mentors. I've got sponsors now that can like speak my name in spaces that I'm not in. And I used all of those things to kind of, get to that point and make that decision. But you got to be clear that like people leadership is what you want, right? Like, admittedly, it is not the only way that you can move upward in engineering careers at all. And it's not for everybody. Like, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. So.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question from Sophia. So could you tell us what is like a day at work for you? How big is your team and the dynamics of it? Mainly remote. How's the culture? And have you met maybe your team in person?
Yeah, awesome question. I could wax poetic about this all day. Um, I am a like full-on Strava fan. I was a Strava fan for 10 years before I started working here. So I gotta do that little caveat disclaimer. I have a team right now of 13 engineers. I do have 3 openings right now to hire. And I also manage another manager. So my engineers span across all of Strava's platforms. So that's iOS, Android, server or backend, and then web. I work with 3 partners that are product managers, and they kind of help with 3 separate business pods inside of my larger team. I also work with 2 designers, soon to be 3. I work with a data analyst and a user researcher and a copywriter and a product marketing manager. So these are like my cross-functional partners. And my team is called Groups Creator and Social. And my team focuses on everything on the Strava platform that athletes use to create their community and be connected with one another. So not so much about like uploading your activities or even your geolocation or the maps. We are like focused on the community part in particular. Every day at Strava is different for me. There are a lot of meetings. My team is mostly remote. There are several that are in the Bay Area, several in Denver, and then the rest of us are kind of spread all throughout all of the US major time zones. And then we also have cross-functional teammates in Europe as well. So that's not like uncommon to try and play calendar Tetris and figure out a good time to meet. But lots of meetings, lots of collaboration, lots of conversations. My engineers are phenomenal, so they do a lot of the work and then come back and tell me kind of, you know, what the technical implementations are and all of that. The next piece was, how is the culture? This is the first place that I have worked at that I have felt comfortable speaking in Spanish or using Spanglish with anybody. This is also the first place that I've worked at that I've been openly out from the beginning. So like in first interview, I basically referenced my wife immediately and felt very comfortable doing that. We have an amazing ERG structure here. So we've got a Latinx ERG, Pride, Pan-Asian, Black at Strava, and the Roundtable, which is the women and femme identifying group. And those have been groundbreaking. It's been amazing to be part of those groups. And Strava really puts their money where their mouth is. They pay the ERG leaders extra money on top of their regular salaries, and they actually pay for us to do things together. So for instance, this year, Strava paid for anybody who wanted to come to get together. We all met here in New Mexico as a Latinx ERG, and we spent a week with each other. We had professional development. We got headshots. We just ate food and hung out. We went salsa dancing. It was amazing. It was just beautiful. So to answer that, the culture feels better than any place else I've worked. It's not perfect. We still have things to work on, but I feel like I can show up as my authentic self every single day and feel comfortable with that and bring that to every interaction, which I love. And have I met my team in person? Yes, several times. We get 2 team offsites a year. So we did one in Denver in the summer and one in San Francisco in November. I also meet like my peers regularly. We do 2 leadership offsites a year. So we had one in San Francisco at the start of the year and one in Washington, D.C. a couple months ago. And yeah, we meet each other regularly now that traveling is much more safe. So I hope that was a lot, but I hope that answers your.
That was a long question too. Thank you so much, Elisa. Yeah,
Yeah,
for everything.
absolutely.
Okay,
Let's
so
see.
Rostan, he's asking, I don't know if you want to read it out loud or.
No, go for it. You can do it.
Okay. When someone finally finds their first opportunity as a developer, they start as a junior, which is to be expected. So, what would be your tips to continue growing as a developer and achieve better positions?
Yeah. I think at first I thought when I started doing this, I thought that the answer to this was just like memorize more code, like Peter was saying, or like learn more code, learn how to code better. And then I figured out pretty quick that that wasn't the answer. Um, you know, for me, when I'm looking at people for promotion and what I see in people that get promoted more regularly is a combination of like technical and soft skills. I think at a certain point, you kind of hit the spot of where like you could pick up another language if you needed to, you understand the fundamentals, you write pretty good code. What really sets you apart is how do you review other people's code? How do you document your code? How do you teach and mentor more junior members on the team? How do you contribute like wider to the engineering culture of your organization? And those are skills that I think some people like tend to overlook, but are actually really important to being promoted. When I talk to my peers about who are the rock star performers in the engineering organization, they all have those qualities that I just described. They are able to collaborate wonderfully. They are able to document their code in a very clear, concise manner. Um, they mentor people. They help us hire people. So I think like at a certain point, once you feel like you are in a good space with understanding the languages that you're working in, start looking at those soft skills and cultivating them. And that's what makes you get to senior, frankly. Like a senior engineer needs to be doing all of those things I just described. And then, of course, it goes up from there.
So I've noticed you mentioned a lot of mentors throughout this session, but how do you find a mentor? Like, would you just go and, hey, would you want to be my mentor? And ask it out, or you build a relationship first, so how that works? Oh, is it me? Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, no, you're back. You're back. It's probably me. It says my internet connection is unstable. Sorry. Let me kill my video and see if that helps it. All right, let's see if that helps, and hopefully y'all can still hear me.
Yes.
Okay, so I think the question was, how do I find a mentor?
Yes.
Or how does anybody find a mentor for that matter? So this is a journey for me that was very difficult. Very quickly in my transition, I realized that for the first time in my career, I was going to need a mentor. And I had no problem finding one in the first tech job that I got. But I want to call out that my mentor was not representative of my identity. So this was a white middle-aged man. And he was a wonderful mentor, okay? I learned a ton from him. But the first time I had a situation come up where it applied directly to being a minority in tech, he didn't really have a ton of input and he couldn't empathize with what I was talking about. And it became pretty apparent to me that not only did I need a technical mentor, somebody who could answer some of those like burning technical problems or unstick me if I was completely stuck, I needed somebody who could help me navigate what it meant to be me in an industry that maybe wasn't used to seeing faces like mine. And that was the tough part. So it took me 7 years to find a Latina mentor that was in a technical role and was further along in her career than I was. And I know that there's more out there, but it did take me 7 years. And I searched high and low. Like, I mean, I would go to conferences and reach out to the keynote speakers, cold message on LinkedIn and be like, can we talk? And I didn't get a great response rate, but I still tried. And it was finally speaking to my VP of engineering here at Strava that did it for me. He was another person of color from a non-traditional background, just like mine. And he did a skip level, like one-on-one with me. And he asked me how he could help me. And I said, I need a mentor and this is what I'm looking for. And within 24 hours, he put me in touch with somebody who put me in touch with the two women that are now my mentors. Two Latinas further along in their career and working at like giant companies that are just, they're badass. They're amazing. But it took me saying it to multiple people and like searching. I think the big thing is like, you can't be afraid to ask people. The worst you're going to get is ghosted. Nobody is going to just be like, how dare you ask me? So just start asking people, and look for somebody who understands what it's like to be you and can answer those questions about how to navigate the space that you're in particular. You can find technical mentorship anywhere, but to find somebody that actually understands the nuance of like your individual identities is really important.
Yeah, so true. Even if you have like a tech mentor, you can also have a personal one, even if you don't like find that combination of like the best of, you know, the worlds you want to dive into. So before we run out of time, I just want to mention something I read on your LinkedIn. And I think it was like December last year when you posted something about your mom being in ICU
Mm-hmm.
and how this made you, you know, like reflect on the journey being the dream and not the destination. So these 7 years of finding the right mentor, I just like immediately relate that moment to, oh, that's the dream, you know, like the journey, those 7 years where you just like this even discover yourself, right? So for my point where I'm getting at is for those that maybe want results, you know, like really fast, how can you give a like a tip on just like how to ease, you know, and being comfortable with uncertainty in a way?
Yeah. I think I want to recognize that we live in a capitalist society. We need jobs and money to pay our bills. We have responsibilities, and I want to recognize that. So this isn't just about like going off and soul searching. I understand that there are real stakes attached to it, but at the end of it, I think, you know, for me, work is not just something that I do because I need to make money. For me, it's such a big part of my life because you spend so much of your life doing it. And I have always wanted it to be something that's meaningful and important to me, um, and aligns with what I want to leave here when I leave this earth. And I don't just want to leave like, oh, I worked at Google or I worked at Microsoft or I worked at Facebook, right? Like that looks great on a resume and it looks good on paper. Or even for that matter, I went to MIT and I got, you know, a degree there. Like, yeah, that looks great on paper. But what I want to leave behind is, you know, something that my mom definitely gave to me, which was this idea that you can be anything that you want. Um, and it's not always easy, but the journey to get there is the fun part. That's, even when it's hard, that's the fun part. Like, to be in a place, in a space where you can figure it out. And like, let's be real, culturally, we have been doing that for generations. Our ancestors were doing that. We figure out how to make something work. We are problem solvers. We always can figure it out. If I think about my grandparents and the things that they would do just to like make things work, you know, I think it's important that I continue to like pay homage to that in my own way. So as you're going through this, when you have setbacks and it's difficult, continue to remind yourself that like one of your strengths is being able to do what you're doing right now, which is resiliency and ability to live in ambiguity. Like, the outcome maybe isn't certain and you don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and yet you can continue to push forward on that. It's a big deal. It's, my wife told me one day, she was like, you know, growing up in a Mexican American household, we don't have generational wealth, but we have generational knowledge. And I was like, man, that's mic drop for me right there. generational knowledge is so valuable and so important. So yeah, hold that close.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing your knowledge today and your experience and tips. If anyone in the future wants to reach out to you, how could they do it? Even like for that matter, can they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please do. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I think there is probably a link to my LinkedIn on the invite, but let me grab my profile link and drop it into the chat for y'all. Please do reach out. Happy to talk to anybody and, you know, talk about your journey or answer specific questions. You know, I am on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So if you reach out, I might not respond right away, but I absolutely will respond to you eventually.
Yes, that's true. She answered me back when I explicitly, I have a question. Can we talk? And well, here we are. So go ahead. There's no shame in asking, and there's no shame in saying I don't know. There's always a lot of support and inspiration having a mentor. So go for it if you don't have one. And if there's like no mentor around, look for a friend, a teacher, someone you feel comfortable, you know, like expressing yourself. And all of these are not my takeaways. These come from all the answers that Elisa has given you today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have an amazing holiday season. Enjoy the break if you are on vacations like Elisa. If you are a remote worker like ourselves, and well, you just have to make your own breaks, but still enjoy them. So have a great evening and good luck to you all.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Daniela.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, Dani, and thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.